Today we're beginning in an area of Lower Manhattan known as Tribeca, which stands for Triangle Below Canal. Here's traffic exiting the Holland Tunnel, heading for points north in Manhattan. Just a fraction of the traffic that would normally be exiting the Holland Tunnel this time of day. And we're also across the street from the NYPD 1st Precinct, which apparently used to be the NYPD's 4th Precinct. I don't know if we can see that on the building facade from here. And here's traffic exiting the Holland Tunnel, trying to go towards Brooklyn. So, walking past the 1st and 4th Precinct. And the police cars that are parked here are a combination of precinct cars and the Counterterrorism Bureau. This is traffic moving south on West Broadway. And there are some cars that are decaled FSD, Fleet Services Division. So those are loaner cars that come from the NYPD's fleet office and loaned to precincts while their regularly assigned cars are in the shop. Here's a van from the Counterterrorism Bureau. Here's a cute little smart car NYPD that's part of the Counterterrorism Bureau. It's hard to imagine that any counterterrorism effort could be effective in this kind of vehicle, but what do I know? And here, for anyone who's been alive since the early 80s and has seen Ghostbusters, and this firehouse was under construction for several years, and it looks like it recently reopened. And I was wrong. The street we were on was not West Broadway, as I had previously said. It was Varick Street. This is West Broadway. Coming up. We're now on 6th Avenue. It's just become 6th Avenue, just below Canal Street. It was Church Street in lower Manhattan. Across the street we have a building called the American Thread Company. I wonder what the original purpose of that building was. Here we have a nice Art Deco building. I don't know what's in here. I think this may be an old telephone company building. And now we're going to take a slight right onto West Broadway, and our next intersection will be Canal Street. And then we'll walk across Canal Street from West Broadway all the way to the Manhattan Bridge, and then we'll walk over the Manhattan Bridge. And as I said, we're on our way to the Manhattan Bridge across Canal Street. This is Canal Street. It is a major east-west route for trucks coming from New Jersey through the Holland Tunnel, across Canal Street, and heading to Brooklyn and Queens and Long Island. Robert Moses wanted to build a Lower Manhattan Expressway to connect the Holland Tunnel with the Manhattan and Williamsburg bridges, but it never happened. There was a great exhibit that the City Municipal Archives put on in the Surrogate Court building about 5, almost 6 years ago, about Robert Moses's attempt to build a Lower Manhattan Expressway. So on the north side of Canal Street, we have Soho. And Soho takes place on streets like Green Street, Mercer Street coming up on the left, we're keeping up pretty well with the vehicular traffic on Canal Street. That ought to say something. Would it have been better with a Lower Manhattan Expressway? Oh, here's one of NYPD cars that are not labeled on the back or the front, and they have regular passenger car license plates. But the side is clearly an NYPD car, and they're here. Often those cars are assigned to traffic enforcement kinds of duties because they're hard to detect from the front or the back. Because when we see the entrance to the Canal Street station up ahead, we know that we're approaching Chinatown. This is the main subway station to access Chinatown. This and the Grand Street station on the B and the D. All right, we'll go over the sunny side of the street. And we're looking north on Broadway now. And here's a sightseeing bus, Top View. Not familiar with that company. Across the street is a 1 block long narrow street called Cortlandt Alley. Fascinating, right? Now we're on Canal at Lafayette Street, and you can see sidewalk vendors with cards displaying their merchandise, and of course it's all original, legitimate designer label merchandise. I guess one of them got concerned and went inside and is hiding. So we continue to walk east on Canal Street. And if you look down here, this is Lafayette Street, and the buildings at the end are U.S. government buildings. Here's a look north on Lafayette Street. I'll cross over again because the light is red and I don't want to waste time standing still. And here we have Baxter Street, and in the distance is Forlini's, an old-time Italian restaurant with tables that have plaques honoring judges and lawyers who comprised a large part of its clientele over the decades. Typical Chinatown fish market. Typical Chinatown fish market. Again. And this is nice. This is Mulberry Street, and of course we're only a week into the lunar New Year, which is still being celebrated here. And here's where Chinatown meets Little Italy. And they live in peaceful coexistence. Jewelry stores. Or former jewelry stores. Mott Street, which is considered probably the main street of Chinatown, of this lower Manhattan Chinatown. Again, look at all the decorations over the street for Lunar New Year. Want to know when the next train is arriving near here? And here we are, approaching the Manhattan entrance to the Manhattan Bridge. And in case any of you need further orientation, here's where we are. The Manhattan Bridge, forget when it was built. I think around 1915. We're going to have to cross to enter the pedestrian walkway. All right, we're crossing Canal Street, heading towards the pedestrian walkway entrance for the Manhattan Bridge. We're going to walk over the Manhattan Bridge to Brooklyn, to downtown Brooklyn. But before we do that, you can see, maybe you can see, across the plaza is Lucky Star bus between New York and Boston. It's one of what used to be many discount bus lines going between New York and Boston, originating from New York's Chinatown. A lot of them are no longer in business because of safety violations. Here is the very grand entrance to the Manhattan Bridge. This archway and the colonnade, it only exists on the Manhattan side. The entrance from the Brooklyn side, as we'll see later, is much less grand. Look at that truck waiting patiently for the pedestrians to cross. Huh. And here's someone going on the wrong side of the bridge, riding a bicycle on the pedestrian-only side. After, I don't know, 15 years of having separate pedestrian and bicycle paths, a lot of people still don't get it. But for the last 15 years or so, The south side has been exclusively for pedestrians, and the north side exclusively for bikes. It's a nearby public school on recess. Not much to see here, except this part of the walkway gets quite a bit of litter, and apparently no one's responsible for cleaning it. And here's where it gets interesting, because we will be walking adjacent to the tracks for the N, Q, and N, Q. Forget, maybe just the N and the Q train coming this side. Here's one now. A Q. And then on the other side of the bridge, the north side, is the B and the D trains. The tracks on the north side connect with the 6th Avenue line, the B and the D. The tracks on the south side, where we are now, connect with the Broadway line, the N and the Q. And since it's a weekday morning, there are 4 lines going over this bridge. We should expect a train every 2 minutes or so. We'll see. Here we have, I think, East Broadway. It's either East Broadway or Division Street. We are only about halfway towards the peak height of the Manhattan Bridge, but you get a sense of how high we are right now. And here we have a mixture of relatively recent high-rise residential buildings, an older one, and many that are much older. And then hopefully you're getting to see some portion of the lower Manhattan skyline, including One World Trade Center, the U.S. courthouses, the Woolworth building, the Verizon building, which became only slightly less ugly with the addition of all the windows on the upper portion of the building. You can see we're not even at the Manhattan Anchorage Tower yet. So if you can see, there's like a 5 or 6 story building close to the waterfront. Should be in view now. It's a self-storage place now, Manhattan Mini Storage, but not so long ago it was the headquarters of the New York Post. So let's just look through here for a minute. We're about to cross the East River. You can see perhaps a water taxi, a sightseeing boat, and then in the distance I see at least 3 NYC ferry boats. One which is leaving Red Hook, one which appears to be going to Red Hook, and another, the one on the right, is pulling into the ferry's main terminal, Pier 11 at Wall Street. And here we have Lower Manhattan, and here we have the FDR Drive, which in the distance becomes officially the South Street Viaduct. And of course, oh, and here's another NYC ferry going under the Brooklyn Bridge. Been in the sunlight all this time. There, we were blocked momentarily by the shadow from the Manhattan anchorage. Now, the only thing that would make this view of the East River even more complete is if there was a New York City sludge boat going up or down the river. Now you can see in the distance, hopefully, coming into view from the right of Governor's Island is a Staten Island ferry. A Staten Island ferry headed to the Whitehall terminal at the very bottom of Manhattan. And the Staten Island ferry, of course, is free. And as we continue towards Brooklyn, now Brooklyn, and especially Brooklyn Bridge Park, are coming into view, hopefully, on the other side of the river. And this, if we can see Brooklyn Bridge Park from here, this is the northernmost part of Brooklyn Bridge Park, and it includes Jane's Carousel in what looks like a glass cube from here, right at the water's edge. This is an old carousel. I don't know how old. It was restored over a period of years in a space in Dumbo, and then the enclosure was built. The carousel was relocated, and it's been open to the public for several years now. Don't know if you can see in the distance, just above the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge, above the middle of the span, is the Statue of Liberty. You may also be able to see a small ferry boat heading to Lower Manhattan. That's the Governor's Island ferry. Continuing our walk across the Manhattan Bridge, here are two northbound New York City ferries, and one which looks like it's heading for the Dumbo stop at Brooklyn Bridge, and another which is at the Dumbo spot just below the Brooklyn Bridge. And some in the distance, if you can see all the way to the horizon, a tall building with a crane on top is a building currently under construction, pretty much right above the DeKalb Avenue station, where the trains running closest to us will be stopping next. The queue anyway, not the end. But this building ahead of us, I don't know what it's called, but it is Brooklyn's first and only, so far, super tall building. So called because it's over 1,000 feet tall. And while there are many of them in Manhattan, this is the first one in Brooklyn, and so far the only one. And just a little point of information. I don't know if you can see it, but the Manhattan Bridge was recently painted blue. Look, a blue bridge. And this little boat speeding up the East River, I believe is either a fireboat or Coast Guard. Well, it'll remain a mystery until next time. Let's look at Lower Manhattan again, including, well, I can't point all the buildings out to you. It'll take forever. But take a good look. Just past the Brooklyn anchorage of the Manhattan Bridge. And down below we have, I think it's Water Street, part of Dumbo. Part of Brooklyn is called Dumbo. Dumbo stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. So we're on top of the Manhattan Bridge Overpass now. This used to be largely industrial, and now it's residential. And this building and others in the area were owned by Jehovah's Witnesses. They were one of the largest property owners in Dumbo. Their headquarters were here. They printed their Watchtower publication here, but several years ago they moved outside of the city and they sold their property, including an undeveloped lot that takes up an entire block in Dumbo, and that undeveloped lot sold for $1 billion several years ago and is now being developed as a multi-use, but I think primarily residential building. And we may be able to see it under construction shortly to our right. Buildings here, the FedEx truck moving very slowly, and the traffic that's moving slowly is on the BQE southbound. This is an area where the traffic in both directions narrows from 3 lanes to 2 lanes in order to minimize the amount of weight crossing the triple cantilever at any one time. The triple cantilever, a Robert Moses project that has the Brooklyn Heights Promenade on top, and then the northbound BQE, and then the southbound BQE, each on cantilevered levels, is in very bad condition, has to be replaced, but the city hasn't been able to figure out a way to replace it without causing massive disruption over a several-year period to the neighborhood and to the surrounding area. Here is where the northbound and the southbound lanes begin to form their separate levels. The traffic going away from us is the southbound traffic, and you can see the brake lights. The pedestrian entrance to the Manhattan Bridge, clearly marked no bicycles, the bollards, and still there will be bicycles. Maybe a title for a movie, There Will Be Bicycles. There's a good looking car. So this is part of the New York City College of Technology, which is part of the City University of New York, or CUNY. These apartment buildings look like public housing, but they're not. It's actually a privately owned development called Concord Village. Here's a power substation for the F and A trains, and C trains, which are running underneath here. We're on J Street, and in a few blocks we will be at the J Street Metrotech station. So that's a power substation. Look at the Art Deco architecture, because this was built around 1932. Here's a public plaza that was built in connection with this privately developed residential high-rise, often in order to get a zoning variance to allow them to build bigger than the zoning would otherwise allow them. The developers agree to provide a public amenity. In this case, this area that's open to the public. And in the city, any area like this that's open to the public has to have a sign, like the one in the distance, saying that it's open to the public and telling the hours that it's open. Call ahead latrine. So this is apparently the Cathedral Basilica of St. James. I never knew its name before. A playground, heavily populated by children who, according to the clock, at 11:10 a.m., I would think would otherwise be in school. And across the street on the left is also part of New York City Technical College of CUNY, and I believe across the street on the right. Looking up Tillery Street, the building, the Gothic looking building on the left is the old post office. Part of it still functions as a public post office, but most of the rest of the building is not post office related anymore. The building with the peaked roof on the horizon is One Pierpont Plaza. In the 2016 election, it was also the location of Hillary's campaign headquarters. So we're crossing Tillery Street, a major artery in downtown Brooklyn, connects the downtown Brooklyn port area and commercial area with Manhattan Bridge, the BQE. It's a challenge crossing it. Hello. So again, I think on both the left and right side of the street are buildings of CUNY's New York City Technical College. And then coming up on the right as we cross Johnson Street, also known as Tech Place, we have New York State Supreme Court and Family Court. Family Court is actually run by the New York City Law Department. Supreme Court. So this is where a lot of people who live in Brooklyn have to come for jury duty. Here's the Marriott Hotel at the Brooklyn Bridge. It was open around the late 90s, maybe 2000. And it was the first brand name hotel ever in Brooklyn. All other hotels in Brooklyn up to this point had been, mostly like hourly room rentals. And here we have the Western, and on our left we're going to be seeing the so-called Metrotech Commons area. So Metrotech was developed in the mid-80s, and it was a major turning point for downtown Brooklyn because it attracted a lot of offices and workers, and in some ways was the catalyst for all the other office and mixed-use construction that's taken place in downtown Brooklyn for the last 10 to 15 years. The change in the downtown Brooklyn skyline has been phenomenal. You can see through the distance some high-rises. Those are some of the older high-rises, older meaning they were built like 15 years ago. There have been many newer ones and many still under construction, including that super tall building we saw from the bridge a few minutes ago. Here's a B62 bus at the beginning of its trip going to Long Island City through Williamsburg. That's a trip that's going to take at least an hour. So just little historical trivia. As I said, this is Metrotech Commons. Before Metrotech was built in the 80s, the subway station, which is now J Street Metrotech, used to be two separate stations. J Street Borough Hall for the AC and F trains, Borough being spelled B-O-R-O, and Lawrence Street for the N and the R train. In the 90s sometime, maybe the early aughts, connection was built between the two stations, and the entire complex was renamed J Street Metrotech. Here's National Grid's Brooklyn headquarters, and This building across the street is being rebuilt, a gut renovation, as we can see from the flags, hopefully for NYU's engineering school, I think. The street address of this building is 370 J Street, and anyone who's ridden the subway since the 70s knows that this used to be the headquarters of the New York City Transit Authority. This entire building. Now, the building, I think, was built in the 40s, and that was just about the time that the Transit Authority was being created from what used to be the Board of Transportation. But I like these markers for the subway entrance. They're either original to when this was built, or they're an accurate replica. And at one time, this was a very busy Transit Authority customer service center. You could go in and get maps and schedules and directions. Now, this building across the street was the headquarters of the Brooklyn Fire Department. I don't know when this building was built, but obviously before 1898, when Brooklyn was consolidated as part of, or consolidated into Greater New York. Across the street is the grand opening of Khufu. I wonder what it is. So this is Fulton Street. It's called Fulton Street Mall. It's been Fulton Street forever. And then I think in the 80s, in order to better attract customers to the shops that were losing business here, they turned Fulton Street into Fulton Street Mall. They banned private vehicles from it. They built benches, brick sidewalks, cobblestone or brick paved streets. unique bus stops and light fixtures. None of that's here anymore. It just looks like any other street, except it's a little narrower and private vehicles aren't allowed. When the Transit Authority outgrew its building at 370 J Street, they expanded into this building, which is, I forgot, 130 Livingston Street, something like that. I don't believe they're here anymore. I think, well, maybe they are, because here are MTA construction workers working on the building. So maybe it's being rehabbed. The MTA's headquarters moved to 2 Broadway from 347 Madison Avenue many years ago. Now, across Boerum Place, this building is 110 Livingston Street. It was the headquarters of the New York City Board of Education for years. And then when Mike Bloomberg became mayor, he, as a symbol of getting mayoral control over the city school system, he moved the Board of Education headquarters to the infamous Tweed Courthouse in Lower Manhattan. This building was sold and redeveloped as residential. Police dog, keep back. Yikes. So in the lower left corner of the building across the street, you can see something that looks like a subway entrance, and it is. It is the current entrance to the New York Transit Museum. In the 1930s, it was an entrance to an active subway station. Court Street Station, on the newly constructed, newly being the 1930s, the Independent line. Court Street stop was an end of the line. It was actually just a spur off of the main line and connected with, and still connects with, Hoyt Skirmahorn. The Transit Museum has only recently reopened since the pandemic began, but it has limited days, just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. looking forward to going back there.
Wait.
So we're walking down Boerum Place, which is also called Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard. And this is still considered downtown Brooklyn. When we cross Atlantic Avenue in 2 blocks, we will be in Boerum Hill. Boerum Hill was featured only this past weekend in the Sunday Times real estate section as a neighborhood to consider living in. And then right across the street here is one of the happiest places on earth. This is the Brooklyn House of Detention. It's part of the City Department of Corrections. And this is a facility that incarcerated people typically go to when they're awaiting trial. It was closed for several years because the population of incarcerated people had decreased so markedly. And then it was closed for several years for a major reconstruction. It reopened a few years ago, and now, as part of the plan put forward in the last few years of the de Blasio administration to close Rikers Island and create 4 new borough-based jails in every borough but Staten Island. This facility is slated to be closed, but I don't think there's any definite plan yet for what and where in Brooklyn a new facility is to be built. So here we are looking east on Atlantic Avenue while we're waiting for the light to change. If you go east for another almost another mile, you come to the waterfront. The subject of a future walk. walking south on Smith Street.
Yeah, so the upstairs bedroom, but yeah.
There's a new Insomnia Cookies across the street. And there's another one on Fifth Avenue near Flatbush. I can understand the one on Fifth Avenue Flatbush. It's near the Barclays Center. I'm not sure whom this location is trying to attract. Visitors to the Brooklyn Detention Complex, perhaps?
Yeah.
And then at the other end of the baking spectrum from Insomnia Cookies is this bakery, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. But it developed a very good reputation and expanded. They have a location in Grand Central Market now and maybe another location. So, Smith Street, 30 years ago, this was full of discount clothing stores, school supply stores, that type of thing. About 20 years ago, it started to become Brooklyn's first restaurant row, and you can find many types of food here. I'm starting to get hungry. Including real gourmet baked goods and desserts. And here we go. Paisano's Butcher Shop. Been here for 62 years. Now there's a Rite Aid up ahead. Many Rite Aids have been converted to Walgreens. I thought Walgreens acquired the chain a few years ago. I don't know why this one is still operating under the Rite Aid name. when you see certain fixtures at the top of a street lamp pole, if you can see this, there's like on the left side of the pole, a box that is maybe 2 feet high, and attached to that is something that looks like a 3-4 foot long antenna. It's part of the city's wireless emergency network, which was built out in the late 90s, maybe the early aughts. I don't think it's used anymore. I don't think it was ever used extensively. Except now, it is used to collect data from all of the wireless water meter reading boxes, like this one, that are attached to almost every building in the city. I don't really know where the dividing line is between Boerum Hill and Cobble Hill. I'm pretty sure we're in Cobble Hill now, but not quite in Carroll Gardens. Well, according to this display, 42 degrees out, making it one of the warmest days in the last week. A very much welcome and appreciated warm day. We're going to take a slight detour down Union Street. All right, and here we are, 377 Union Street. Looks like every other house on the block. Nice brownstone. You can see that the main entrance doors are slightly ajar and that there's a cable holding them shut. You can see the residue of one or more eggs being thrown at this window, and several old newspapers on the lawn. This building actually looks a lot neater than it did several months ago. It looked totally abandoned. What is it? This was owned by Paul Manafort and seized by the U.S. government. I'm not sure what happens to it now that he's been pardoned. Now, I think the entire length of Smith Street is also labeled Eileen C. Dugan Boulevard. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know who Eileen C. Dugan is. State Police in Brooklyn. We are really living in different times. Another Rite Aid pharmacy still operating as a Rite Aid. And here we have Carroll Park. City bikes looking pretty popular today. The office of New York State Assembly member Joanne Simon. She's not our assembly member, but we get mailings from her. Mailings that annoy me. She mails to her constituents her own design of the alternate side suspension calendar for each year. And then she illustrates the cover of it with photos of parking signs that are not New York City parking signs. They're like generic signs you can find anywhere else in New York State, but they don't exist in New York City. Why did she put them on this brochure? It's been bugging me for 3 years. Does she not know what a New York City parking sign looks like? Was her staff too lazy to photograph one? There seem to be plenty of them around the city. This was a few years ago Momofuku milk bar location. Now I think it's just a no-name neighborhood coffee shop. Here's the southernmost entrance to the Canal Street subway. And as we cross the street and continue to walk south on Smith Street, we can see in the distance where the subway tracks emerge from being underground at Canal Street to approaching the Smith 9th Street station, which is the highest station in the New York City subway system. When you read the statistics that the MTA officially publishes, they typically list the height of the Smith 9th Street station as 87.5 feet above ground level. Why do they include the half foot? I mean, is there a station that's 87 feet and they have to distinguish it with this 6-inch difference? I think actually there isn't any other elevated station that even approaches 80 feet, so whatever. I don't think anything else in the transit system is measured as precisely. Here's a G descending. So across the street for the next several blocks, you'll see construction fencing. There's a lot of environmental remediation work going on here in conjunction with the Gowanus Canal being dredged and cleaned up over the next many years. The surrounding land is being environmentally remediated and is going to be developed at some point. Because space is always at a premium in New York, we'll use the space under the elevated tracks for storing equipment. And in the next block, we'll see that some of the space under the viaduct was developed in the last couple years as a playground, which is managed by the New York City Parks Department. So here again we have children playing during school hours. I'm sure it's an official recess. They're not playing hooky. There used to be more playground space under the tracks just east of here, and the playground was imaginatively named Under the Tracks Playground, and all it really consisted of was paved surface and a few walls. I guess you could play handball or something. Bright graffiti. Now we're actually walking under the structure, the viaduct, which is called the Culver Viaduct. I don't know who Culver was. I'll have to research that before the next walk. And this is the southernmost segment of the playground here under the tracks. And let's just get a look, if we can, at the Smith Street, 9th Street station. Get a perspective on how high it is from ground level. 87.5 feet. So if you've been alive since about 1990 and have seen Goodfellas, you may recognize this block as the scene of what for me was one of the most tension-filled scenes in the entire movie. No spoilers, where Karen is being lured into a discount clothing location on this block. Right, we just turned onto 9th Street, so we're at the corner of Smith and 9th. All right, hopefully the bus, oh good, the bus is waiting. Here's the exterior of the escalator going up to the Smith and 9th Street station. Or a series of escalators, actually. Sometimes they work. I think there was a recording studio on this block at some point. And here we have Bayside Fuel Oil Depot. Looking up, this is the Gowanus Expressway, formerly the Gowanus Parkway, before trucks were allowed. But both the Parkway and the Expressway versions were built by Robert Moses. And you remember from the earlier part of the walk, as we were coming over the Manhattan Bridge and approaching Brooklyn, that the traffic was moving very slowly. And now you can see it's hardly moving at all because it's narrowed from 3 to 2 lanes in a little over a mile. A concrete plant, a wonderful neighbor to the fuel depot along the canal. And here we are under the Gowanus Expressway. So the Gowanus also had to be elevated to a very high point when crossing the canal, as did the Culver Viaduct for the subway, because of federal maritime regulations and the Gowanus Canal being a navigable waterway. It had to be open to ships at all times, and I think ships to this day get priority. I'm not sure about that. So the subway had to be built to 87.5 feet high in order that ships could clear at all times and the trains could continue running. Similarly, the Gowanus Viaduct, the Gowanus Expressway Viaduct, was high so that it never had to shut down to let ships pass. Now we're on the Hamilton Avenue drawbridge, which is rarely open, but when it is, it's a pain. Traffic can be stalled for up to a half hour. And here's a train leaving Smith 9th Street. This used to be a Pathmark supermarket. It was the go-to supermarket for many people in the Gowanus and Sunset Park and Park Slope areas. Now it's a construction equipment rental location. Go figure. Don't know if that was visible. I wanted to catch a school bus that was lettered all in Hebrew characters. It was Yiddish, I presume, but it could have been Hebrew. So across the street, we have two major pieces of city infrastructure. For the City Department of Transportation, there's the Hamilton Avenue asphalt plant. I think it's one of two municipal asphalt plants in the city. And then just to the left of it, this structure that looks like a huge barn with the Department of Sanitation logo, the pre-2015 Department of Sanitation seal on the top. That is a Marine Transfer Station, or MTS, and sanitation trucks, and we'll see a lot of them in just a minute as we cross the street. sanitation trucks that collect garbage in this part of Brooklyn go there and they dump the load. It is compacted into a sealed container, and then it's barged away to some distant landfill in another state, most likely, or at the very least western New York. The Department of Sanitation, as a function of the city charter, has to have a separate operation in each of the city's 59 community districts. And that usually means having a separate garage in each of the 59 districts. Sometimes 2 or 3 adjacent districts will share a big garage. We're passing a number of trucks that are from the garage on our right, just beyond the trucks. It's the Brooklyn Community Board 2 garage. We're actually in Community Board 6 in Brooklyn. Sometimes municipal facilities that service one community district are located in another. That's a sore spot for some people. Others don't care. This building is a New York City Department of Transportation, or DOT building. This is a fairly recent occurrence. I think this was a privately used building before, and now it's being used by the city for I don't know what related to DOT. And if we can see another shot of the Gowanus, and how little or how slowly traffic is moving. Okay, here we have more sanitation trucks parked all around the border of the Lowe's. I'm sure Lowe's loves that and probably raises it every year at a community board meeting. We're going to cross the street. So, dozens of plows, which only last week were attached to these collection trucks. A train, an F train, too long to be a G train. So this is the garage for the Department of Sanitation, Brooklyn Community Board 6. We're actually physically in Community Board 6 now. Somewhere in this building it says Department of Street Cleaning. I can't find it right now. But that is an indication that the garage was built before 1929, the year when the Department of Street Cleaning became the Department of Sanitation. You can see in many old Max Fleischer Popeye cartoons the collection baskets being usually pushed, baskets on two wheels, and they say DSC in the cartoon, Department of Street Cleaning. Almost everything I know about New York City history is from Popeye cartoons. All of the true facts, anyway. This playground used to be a real dump with cracked asphalt and equipment that was falling apart. So it looks much better now. I have no idea when that happened. I need to get out more. All right, and here we are crossing 3rd Avenue at 11th Street, and we're just gonna finish crossing the street and turn briefly to the viaduct, which is still highly elevated for New York City subway line, and I think that's an appropriate place to end today's walk. So this is infrared, and this is what you've been watching.